Hello and welcome to day number 2 of the Eastern Clash, where we are one step closer to finding out who will come out on top in the Eastern region. Yesterday we sent home 2 teams, Deadly Kittens from Southeast Asia and the #1 seed out of the Chinese region, Super Perfect Team. I'm joined at the desk with Wolf and Trixler, and guys, a lot of stuff happened yesterday.
Yeah, it sure did. You know, rip Deadly Kittens, man. I was really cheering for them. One of those teams that your heart just goes out to them every time you see them lose, unfortunately, but they will not be in the tournament for the rest of the tournament. But the other big thing that is really becoming interesting for us is the Eastern Clash is becoming the Illidan show.
Yeah, it's a lot of Illidan coming in. It's the split push power that Illidan's shown us, basically since BlizzCon, since the Global Championship for Gold Series in China. We saw it kind of rising up, and now in Eastern Clash specifically, not only is Illidan global hero, but he's the highest prioritized one by the Korean teams especially, and I think that going into today, he might even fill into that first ban slot because he's just so powerful.
There's been a lot of discussion about, metas going into this tournament. The Western meta versus the Eastern. Some teams defending theirs when we're looking at our pre-tournament interviews, whereas others were almost forfeiting it over as if the North American and European metas kind of are, at least the superior ones, but still unable to be able to perform that here at the Eastern Clash. It's been really interesting to see it be able to develop out through. And is there anything that you guys expect to see today to really kind of stand out as a pick other than, obviously, we know the Illidan?
I mean, you were talking about a lot of stuff this morning. In fact, I feel like there's a lot of stats that you should let the people know because it's actually really cool discussion points. I think a Nubrak in particular is being missed out on going into the second rotations. I mean, go ahead, bring us some of those numbers that you were yelling about on the bus this morning.
No, I've got a lot of hype about the statistics, but we're not going to bring those yet. We got to figure out what's going on, what these guys are fighting for first, and we know that is a huge amount of money. The prize pool here that we have at this tournament, $100,000 is going to be on the line as we see this broken down. First place, walking away with $30,000. And each of the Korean teams, Wolf, are just sitting there looking at that number, wanting to claim that for their own.
That's right. I mean, Black wants to defend their title and take that 30K home again. And obviously, after the disappointment from the Korean teams getting 3rd and 4th place at the mid-season brawl, they want to show a dominant performance here in the Eastern Clash, take half of the prize money for themselves, at least the top 2 teams. That's what they're looking for here. And then take that showing into the final phase of HGC Korea, then go on to win BlizzCon. That's the goal here. But it feels like this is just one stepping stone for the Korean teams. Redemption is the storyline, especially for MVP Black and L5.
Redemption's a big storyline, but I also like seeing these new teams coming together and their rosters being built out. I mean, you look at every single team currently in the top 3, Tempest, L5, and of course MVP Black, and their rosters are coming together and they're becoming deadly and lethal. And so it's kind of great to see that kind of small step back that happened from MSB as they changed out their rosters to them now finally growing into teams that can earn victories at these big clashes.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, remember, these are some of the newest rosters for dominant Korean teams we've ever had. Some of the other rosters lasted over a year or at least through 2 international events. So these are the newest rosters for these 3 teams we've ever seen. And even still, they look dominant in this tournament. The big question is, will that dominance last until BlizzCon? And that's yet to be seen.
And their dominance, has, again, sent home those 2 teams, Deadly Kittens and SPT. But a lot of things happened in day number 1 of the Eastern Clash. So we're going to take a look at the bracket and really see how that all unfolded. What was the fate here for the teams? And what stood out for you guys the most when now looking at the bracket of day 1?
I feel like CE taking a map off of Tempest, we knew going into the bracket that was a very likely possibility. We talked about it at the opening of the show, and it came true, and Tempest definitely showed some holes here. Going into the match against MVP Black, I feel like they really need to step it up. They had the right ideas in the draft, but execution felt a little bit off, and I feel like CE might be one of the favorites to make it to the end of the losers bracket as a result, showing good performances there against Tempest.
I think in general, too, also just Koreans versus X region, the game number 2, always being interesting and much more closer than you expected. Is this the Korean teams going into game number 2 and not really putting their best foot forward, or is it the opposing region stepping up? And I think so far, I'm really enjoying what I'm seeing from Taiwan. Soul Torturers in particular has really impressed me.
Yeah, and honestly, I know Deadly Kittens is out of the tournament, but I think they blew a lot of people away with their performance against MVP Black yesterday. One of the games, the second game, as you say, where it seems like the Korean teams are falling apart a little bit, was really close. We saw smart decision-making, and I feel like from the Korean teams, we're seeing a little bit of lack of respect after dominant game number 1s in best of 3s, now going into best of 5s. If they don't respect their opponents going to game 2, 3, potentially 4, then they could end up falling apart. I think studying the drafts, even if they feel like they're the better mechanical team, is going to be important because maybe Korea isn't drafting the best in this tournament so far.
Well, there is a lot to be said about the Korean teams. And talking about the Korean teams, we're going to start off the schedule here for day number 1 with 2 Korean teams. The number 1 seed out of Korea, MVP Black, will be taking on Tempest. And as we look further through the day, Team Face Check versus L5. And then in the losers bracket, we see CE and Soul Torturers waiting to see the results of those first 2 matches.
Team Face Check versus L5. Now that's going to be a fun one to watch simply because of Team Face Check and their style that they pride themselves on. Is it good enough to handle the Korean pressure that could be coming their way? L5 is definitely going to give them a run for their money.
I think there's definitely a chance that Team Face Check takes a game here. They looked really prepared yesterday, and I was really impressed, especially against their opponent's Super Perfect team when they faced off against the Chinese team there. They looked really well prepared for strategies that no one's really seen before, Nova, for example. So good adaptation on the fly. The cool thing about that bracket that we just saw, though, was the potential rematch between, of course, Tempest and the said team there. So they have the rematch between Tempest and CE. Challenge, if you will, is going to be an exciting one because maybe CE gets revenge. They took the game the first time they played off against each other, and maybe they take the series the second time around.
But there's also the rematch factor of MVP Black versus Tempest. The first time we saw that happen, that was a 3-0 in the favor of MVP Black. And now I would argue that was earlier in the season. That was almost a month ago that occurred. But honestly, it looked like in every single factor of the game, MVP Black was that much better than Tempest. However, Tempest did have some solid team fights in that matchup, so going into the rematch today, if we see them step up a little bit more, maybe we can go a little bit further in that best-of-5 series.
Yeah, no, I mean, these guys played, as you said, almost like a month and a half ago in the Korean HGC, and it was unsuccessful for Tempest, but they have absolutely grown as a roster here, and we are not going to, keep it back for you guys any longer. We're going to take a closer look at MVP Black and get right into the action. And there we saw MVP Black. I mean, there's pretty much, I feel like we could talk about this team, break them down, the history, the dynamic, everything about them for a long while. But if you were to give me your biggest point going into this series specifically about MVP Black, what are you looking for, Trey?
I mean, there's always the rich factor, but I'm going to go ahead and step over that one because that's the one that one brings up. I think Tist. Tist is one, here he is actually in the front. He has come together in the last 7 months as a warrior that many teams would love to have. He knows how to get those engages, and he always sets up his aggressive teammates that want to force the fights.
I feel like when he replaced Sign on this roster, it felt like Sign was in decline, right? Sign then moved into Tempest, and when you looked at top 3 warriors, it always felt like Noblesse, Tist, and then Sign for Korea. But at the end of Phase 1, we had to ask the question, is Tist the better warrior than Noblesse? Looked like he was outperforming him, was doing more for his team, accomplished things more often in the front lines on the Muradin. And now that Noblesse has retired from professional play, you look at Tist and you have to say this is one of the best warriors in the world and absolutely the best warrior in Korea. But when I look at this, you look at what MVP Black did last split when they had, unfortunately for them, Kyocha was replacing Rich. Big shoes to fill. I think those shoes were not filled. But when I watched Kyocha fill the shoes of Mary Day instead, it feels like the comparison is a lot closer. And now they still have this incredibly strong frontliner in Rich when he's going on the melee heroes, when he's going in the top lane.
It was really awesome to hear from Kyocha in our pre-tournament interview of the Eastern Clash, where he kind of, he's talking about the other regions and supports that he's using to kind of embody and be able to learn from. But then also hearing, that he was able to talk to Mary Day, and Mary Day is even there giving him pointers and being able to help him out, because we know, I mean, honestly, Mary Day is respected, I think, internationally as one of the best supports in the world, even in maybe the downfall of MVP Black and some of the less successful moments there. So it's really cool to see that even now with him retiring, stepping away, that they're looking for the growth of MVP Black. And it's just, I adore that camaraderie.
Still get the guidance. I mean, I will say I do miss Mary Day Karazim, man. That was such a treat to watch. So hopefully Kyocha at some point can pull him out there and get aggressive.
We've seen a lot of retirings, quote unquote, in the Korean scene. Players coming back. Rich himself. He's right there in the booth.
Yeah, sure.
He's sitting in the melee chair. He said he was done. He's back. So you never know. Maybe a player like Meride comes back eventually.
I mean, as a guy who went into the retirement route, I can tell you it's a struggle. You know, every single day I watch the video game, I am sitting there going, you know, maybe I want to get my hands on that mouse and keyboard. But now we're going to look at the other side of the coin there, and that is going to be the 3rd seed out of Korea, and it is Tempest. You saw there the last player being Sign, who recently moved from MVP Black to play for Tempest. That is not the first time a player has actually left MVP Black to play on the roster of Tempest, Wolf.
This is true. I want to put the focus on Sign for a moment, because when you look at what Sign was able to accomplish throughout 2017 overall, it feels like it's the weakest version of Sign we've ever seen on the Tempest roster. And a lot of people put the blame on Sign, put the blame on Modern Life for Tempest's weak performances in Eastern Clash #1. I say weak performances, but it's really the ire of the Korean fans and, of course, the fans of Korean play internationally that made those claims, because they did go through last Eastern Clash without dropping a single map to Chinese teams, but on the other side of the coin, they didn't win a single game against any of the Korean teams, not a single map. And now having Kono back on the roster, he's a DPS. Sign seems to be gelling with the team better. And H82, they've put him on the comfort roles that he likes to play. We even got to see his Artanis on Dragonshire yesterday, so it looks like yesterday was the warm-up for Tempest to try to get their mindset right. But I feel like already taking their first loss to a Chinese team in CE, confidence might be on the bit of the low end right now for this team that now has to face off against the tournament champions, or rather defending champions of Eastern Clash, MVP Black.
Well, I really hope that warm-up does bring them up to speed, because it was great to see them play those comfort roles yesterday. The first time these two teams matched up, H82 had a horrible time against Rich. He was shut down almost every single engagement. Now, that did come down to Malfield maybe being a little bit stronger than he is now. The iteration has been altered slightly, but I am afraid to see what a Rich Illidan could do here. I think he needs to be picked up pretty often and pretty quickly, or banned out, or H82 will have a very devastating time in that top lane.
I want to throw something by you guys really quickly when looking at Tempest, because for me, Hyde seems to be kind of looked over very quickly. And in his prime, I would argue he was, out of all the world champion supports we had, the one that maybe provided the most to his team whenever they were at their top of their game. And still to this day, he seems to constantly be a reliable source, and maybe more so than even, like, for instance, one that stands out that maybe didn't bring that next level play was Swoy. Even though he is a 2-time world champion, it does feel like he didn't stand out as much in that prime roster. And I just want to feel like, you know, do you guys feel like he's kind of overlooked in the current meta?
I think that Swoy was always a player that played safe as a support. He was never the one to make the hyper plays, but he never died, so he was always there to make decent plays, right? That was his style. Whereas if you look at Hyde and you compare the top tier supports over Korean history, Meride, Hyde, Swoy, etc., you always have to look at, and even Darvish, really, you put him in the list, you have to look at how much hero damage Hyde does more than anybody else. They called him Rhaegar, they called his Rhaegar basically the wolf, the gray mane. They called him the gray mane support in Korea. That was the nickname for him because he did so much damage in wolf form, hyper aggressive. One of the players that was really frustrated by the balance change with no self-cast ancestral healing because he does so much damage. He's hyper aggressive, and I feel like you can count on him to be in range for the big heals, and you can also count on him to get a lot of takedowns because he's always up at the front of the action. And when you put that compared to Swoy, remember, he's the safer support. He's not the one who's diving in hard, and Kyocha just isn't experienced enough right now to make those hyper plays.
I very much agree with you, but we are ready to figure out where we're going to be going for game #1 to kick off the Eastern Clash here in day #2. It's going to be exciting. Again, this is 2 Korean teams, so naturally we would expect, you know, the Braxis holdout to be removed, and to no surprise, MVP Black is going to take that one away. Towers of Doom ban, though, on the side of Tempest, it's a bit of a wild one. Typically, we expect the Warhead Junction there out of old school Korea on Korea. And MVP Black with that Tomb of the Spider Queen, this has been a go-to map for them for a long while, honestly.
It's kind of an interesting ban for Towers of Doom 2 instead of the ban on Warhead, because you can't really expect that we'll be going to Warhead for Tempest. I don't think you expect that you're going to be leading the series with a map win, and traditionally, if you lose, you take the first pick. So I don't think they're thinking, all right, we're going to do this snipe Warhead Junction pick. So we're going to Suma the Spider Queen, which has been a very big go-to for the Korean teams in this tournament, which is actually quite rare. You normally see it as game 2 or game 3. You kind of play it as a counter pick to what your opponents have been strong with. So a little bit surprising here to see it as game number 1.
Well, Tempest is going to open up with an Oriole ban. Will MVP Black answer back with the Uther ban, or are we going to see more of those stitches that we've been seeing for the last few days, or even that Genji, which, to be honest, Dread, you've talked about it a little bit this morning, but let's go ahead and let the people know at home, probably not warranted.
All right, so we're going to hit some of the differences because we brought up a lot in day number 1, the Western Clash meta versus the Eastern meta. And Ariel obviously is a colossal focal point for both aspects of the world. But Genji, we've seen 5 games out of him yesterday, and he's only managed to find himself 1 win. Whereas Uther has a 100% involvement rate, and he's won 8 out of the 10 games that he's been into. Oftentimes, the team who bans the Ariel, in fact, is the one who forfeits over the Uther. Not comfortable to get that first pick. But the only team that is lost with an Uther on their side is Deadly Kittens, who's already out of the tournament. You know, we have to look at maybe that's an argument of skill versus the draft pick. But either way, MVP Black is going to keep things norm so far here and remove that stitch.
Okay, so the Genji removal here I think is basically required. If they didn't take the Genji, almost certainly Black would take both the Genji and the Illidan, which we've seen so many times. And even though this is a smaller map, and it's not going to have as much impact as a map like Sky Temple Cursed or Warhead Junction even will have for the global Illidan there, I feel like this is a smart move by Tempest. But you have to imagine with the Stitches ban here that Black was prepared for this. They also know this is not as much the Illidan map as others, so they might just take the safe Uther Greymane rotation for the wave clear, for the camp clears, and that's kind of a draft, as you and I always talk about Dread, we were talking about on the bus today. We always want to draft towards something you can build around, not so much something that you feel is the strongest combo when you're in your first rotation. They take the Tyrael, however, over the Greymane.
I do wonder, though, if the Genji first pick is really needed with Uther on the field. I feel like Uther, if there is that Genji Illidan threat, is the one support that you want to make sure you have that foundation for to handle that pushing in. The Benediction Stun, the Divine Storm possibility, even the Cleanse or the level 7 Guardians that you can move into. All these are great tools to handle both those heroes. Regardless, Tempest decides to go with the Genji, as you mentioned, but I wonder if we go throughout this tournament, if that will start to alter if Uther is up and available.
And with the Tyrael pickup for MVP Black, that is a warrior that can actually fill both the 1, the 4, I mean, any lane matchup that you want. He can participate in either one of those lanes. So it is, again, a very vague, if you will, draft so far here for MVP Black, other than it's very apparent they like their invulnerabilities.
Yeah, exactly. And they've also denied invulnerabilities away from Genji. And that's obviously where his Dragon Blade is going to be at its strongest, is when he's CC'd in those moments. So they're going to go ahead and grab the Rhaegar here with the Greymane. So it's going to be the burst heals here for Greymane. But you have to feel like the draft for Tempest just simply doesn't lead down a strong path right now, whereas MVP Black has the world as their oyster. They have so many options they can use with this draft. And even the Cassia is a possibility here going forward. You've got the blinds there for the Greymane. So Tempest may even get rid of the ban now as we go into the second phase. The Diablo ban, very interesting here.
Yeah, it's very interesting because you just talked about the Anubarak before this, and that has been a huge focal point for drafts in all of the Western world. Anubarak, throughout all of the tournament, has only been looked at post-secondary ban phase, and so MVP Black still willing to high-pick the Tyrael, and then ignoring the Anubarak once more, leaving that as an option over to Tempest possibly could be a very big risk, because Anubarak currently has won every game he has been present in.
But there's still a world here where we can maybe see double warrior with Anubarak, right? You could use that Cocoon to handle the Genji. It'd be a little bit on the harder side. You're missing out on the wave clear, but the control in team fights might be something they want to go down.
I completely agree. Yeah, that is a good tool that they might be able to use, Wolf.
Normally when you see the Diablo ban, it's against players like Hooligan that normally stylistically favor it over other heroes, or when you want a hyper-mobile hero. Genji's already taken away from them. Greymane's not available. Almost makes me wonder and question, will we see the rich Zeratul in this draft? It's going to be Illidan. He's still up, so that's going to be what they're more afraid of, is dealing with the Diablo with the Illidan. Not as crazy mobile as the Genji or Zeratul. Not as necessary to ban it, again, with the Illidan pick, but they've got the Task, the Illidan, and the Uther. And as we mentioned, this is really kind of a triple support composition that empowers Illidan to be the hyper carry in team fights, but on the same token, he has the split push potential, especially once you kill that top fort. You're going to go to the top lane, you're going to look to start getting that extra EXP, try to get that keep wall. It's very difficult for the draft of Tempest right now to respond to that, and you almost want to think about now, do you even bring in a Dahaka here, because how are you going to deal with that split pushing with what they've drafted so far?
This is a terrifying draft that MVP Black has managed to be able to pick up. And again, talking about some of those statistics that we have brought up right now, like numbers-wise, MVP Black, it's not even close with the heroes that they have. The Tassadar, Rhaegar hasn't been successful if Illidan is not on his side. He's lost every game that he doesn't have a hyper carry to be able to enable. Granted, there is a Genji on the side of the table that they might be able to help out here. The double warrior coming in. Arthas is another great Rhaegar target, and it helps with the wave clear. I'm not trying to say that Rhaegar doesn't have a place here, but again, looking at solely the numbers, this draft right now is not even close.
Yeah, I think they just went for the Rhaegar because they wanted something to keep Genji alive with the ability to bring out the Reflect and, of course, the Ancestor Healing, but we'll see how that works out. I was kind of wanting an Arthas into a Johanna, but I can see what Arthas ETC does here. You get the engages, you're able to actually control that Illidan when he's diving in.
I just feel like they're dealing with the team fighting aspect of this very well, dealing with the Illidan dive, but they don't deal with the Illidan split pressure in any way with this. And this feels like it might just be a 5th pick Li Ming here because you have the Wave of Force to deny potential Moshes, even though that's not really meta. In the past, we'd see comps exactly this 5-man with Uther and the Tyrael for invulnerability, Tastar, the hyper carry Illidan, then you have the Li Ming for the range damage. It's going to be Rich who gives you the reset to end up winning the fight. But again, less meta and something that we've barely seen at all throughout HGC Korea from MVP Black. They're going to take the Tychus instead, the safer way to burn down that front line, the Arthas, the ETC.
Tychus has become more of an option against Genji, more in North America actually. The idea is that you kind of let him be on himself, and whenever Genji goes in for the engage, you drop down the Odin, get the resistance, which buys time for your teammates to come back and help. Here in this scenario, though, MVP Black allows for their 4-man to dive forward, and Tychus could be on the outskirts, bring out the Odin, and of course, siege away.
And, you know, MVP Black was before the rework, or right after the rework of Tychus, a lot of teams around the world didn't feel it was necessarily worth the pick at first glance. MVP Black was the first team to start playing it competitively, originally with the Tassadar and only on Infernal Shrines, but they were using it for that Odin to make sure that they could get more out of the early objectives, make sure that they can pressure down the map. That's something we can really see come online here, again, on Tomb of the Spider.
I think they have to. Tempest has to get a lot of picks in the early game. They have to 4-man rotate. They have to get Howling Blast. They have to connect them in order to get value and win this early game. Otherwise, Illidan's going to split push them to hell in the late game.
Well, let's go ahead and get day 2 started in the Eastern Clash. As MVP Black on the left side will be here in the blue, and on the right, Dread. Who do we have?
It's going to be Tempest here with the ETC double warrior composition once more, but they've got a lot of aggression, Trick. They've got themselves a Grey Mane, they've got themselves the Genji, and they have Rhaegar to maybe make up for a bit of that wave clear they've been struggling in.
What do you think about the laning here? Do you put Arthas and ETC together with Genji floating around and leave Grey Mane in the bottom and let him solo lane?
I would like to see the Arthas probably just be his own, you know, onto the bottom half, use the ETC as the body to make sure the Hyde can help with that wave clear onto the Rhaegar, and then Genji is just going to stop the bleeding, and whatever lane is going to be struggling the most, because it's very unlikely that you get a pick on any of the heroes that MVP Black has unless they take an absurdly greedy rotation.
Yeah, gotta agree with you, man. Uther, as long as he hangs out in the back, you're fine. Dimensional shift, Tassadar, but hang on, aggression already in the start. Tits low on health, we'll be able to back up, and there's Kyocha bringing out the heals while Rich, he's looking a little thirsty, wanting to go for a fight. Yeah,
and that right there shows the power of MVP Black's composition with that clump up there, able to find themselves the win onto the wave clear, and it's not something you would say at first glance. It's just because they have that Tassadar. They've got the shielding there from the Tyrael, and it looks like they're going to use a 2-1-2, but MVP Black getting caught out here up on top. Tempest is showing that they're here to play.
That is the strength of their comp. If they're able to find a number advantage, Genji can jump in, as you mentioned, stop the bleeding and force a fight. Lockdown coming in there, securing the kill on Tychus, and he will be falling victim for the first person in this game.
It's a really interesting choice to see Tassadar Illidan 2 versus 1, but that is, you know, something at least within looking towards North America that's rather common. If they feel as if they aren't necessarily in a dominant 1 versus 1, send somebody up there to be able to aid out. But it's going to be a 5-man collapse for both sides. Very fluid rotations coming out from these teams.
Yeah, Tempest showed yesterday they're willing to gank Illidan often. I think that might be why the response is here with that Tassadar. You're seeing it more as of late. Hankano taking some poke on the right side, while the 4-man also starts to rotate in. So they'll push in the bottom a little bit. Arthas does take a little bit of a time to clear out his wave side, and they use that opportunity multiple times now to rotate the middle and look for a fight. Tempest has already caught this, though, and they have Sion in a position always to anchor and make sure the team can get away from the fight.
And it's very interesting to see that Tempest is struggling at controlling these waves early on. I did think between the ETC and Rhaegar Greymane that they would be able to get that poke in. I mean, obviously the Tassadar wave player is nothing to laugh at, but he's too busy with Illidan, helping Illidan do his thing onto the bottom half of the map here. So Tempest might need to find a way to kind of regain control to the upper half of this map, because we know that at least from my perspective, looking at Tempest, is they are an absolutely amazing and astounding team. The biggest thing is that they just failed to keep up the pressure. Man, that MVP Black can, but they are doing so in this game, getting the first 2 kills and even dropping a couple gems there on the side of Black.
Yeah, today they woke up and drank their orange juice. They have really shown up here, and they have been bringing multiple attacks to their opponents. Already 2 kills in the game.
Is that like the Tempest version of Wheaties? You go with the orange juice?
Like Championship Sundays, I drink orange juice, and that's when you know my best casting's line.
Wow. You know,
it's a tip for you.
You know, I'm gonna need one. Thank you for the help there. Orange juice, that's the way to improve life here, apparently. Rich caught out. Howling Blast, Sign not comfortable to move in for that power side. Even though Genji was possibly within range here, they're holding it back, which I feel like is a pretty smart move to make here into Black, that they are controlling now the waves onto the top half, and they have themselves the momentum.
They need to. They want to get that first turn in with the composition that they have. And you kind of got a display of why we see Sake constantly going to that ball to help out Rich. Arthas, if he can get that lockdown and find a moment where Rich, who does like to push his boundaries, can get caught out, you'll see he'll have to retreat away from the fight at half health, which gives Arthas that lane dominance. That's why we keep seeing Sake head down there and help him out whenever possible.
Yeah, H82 onto the Arthas is such an annoying hero to try and deal with. I mean, the auto attack debuff alone just pretty much disables Illidan, not because the damage output of Illidan gets crippled so much, but because of his passive, knowing that the auto attacks get the reset onto his basic abilities. And that's something that, you know, a lot of people maybe might not understand. Why does that truly hurt Illidan the most? It's because he just can't evade on like a 2-second cooldown, not get those dashes in constantly here. But the first Webweaver phase, thanks to H82 getting that turn in, is going over to Tempest. And suddenly, I'm feeling a bit scared here for Black.
Yeah, Tempest looking much better in their rematch. Remember, 6 weeks ago, we had these 2 teams fighting it out, and MVP Black took an early lead in all 3 of their games and pushed it forward and never let up. So far, Tempest has already changed the status quo of what we expected to happen in this matchup. They are holding up in the early side, moving towards level 7, and already looking for turret experience to get towards that level 10.
So let's see what the laning decision is here going to be for Tempest. Traditionally, you expect at least a 3-man collapse to the middle lane, trying to keep the teams busy. MVP Black looks like they're going to make that happen. Tempest a smidge later than that of Black, and here it is, the collapse coming in. Top Webweaver, only Uther left up to deal with that. I can tell you that is not what you like to see when you are the Uther player.
No, Uther, please team, I need help in this top lane. I have a big giant spider pushing in. Gonna have to deal with that. Eventually we'll clear it out, but they will lose out on the turrets, which do warrant that experience that Tempest now has. You see the advantage, 8.5 to 7 and nearly a half.
And a lot of that was because when Tempest moved mid to draw the rotation out of MVP Black, it suddenly left a very, very big lane mismatch up on both top and bottom. Arthas into Illidan 1v1. We know how that goes. That's why we've been talking about Sake coming down and helping him out. Rich there onto the Illidan. On top, the Uther versus the Webweaver. I know there's no hero there, but that is a lane mismatch. He is so slow at getting the wave clear, and suddenly Tempest find themselves miles ahead of MVP Black, but they cannot let up at any point. This is MVP Black we're talking about.
MVP Black are trying to find a way to force a fight, and every single time Tempest is able to escape. The totem comes out from Hyde, Sign bringing out the knockback from Illidan. In fact, Reset may have got caught out. Honkan on the side, he goes in for the dive, he will get the kill, looking for another one as well as they turn around for Rich.
Yeah, but now H82 is looking to make things happen there. Howling Blast was thrown out rather early. Lockdown, just go ahead, just get a bit of poke there, the deflect, use stun locking down, and that's enough to get him. Very greedy play, and now Rich and friends are looking to aggress, but H82, again, with that Arthas slowing everything down. Frozen Tempest is such an effective tool. Cleanse drop from Hyde, and that's enough to get it. Power slide response, dead Tisk.
Dead Tisk there as Tyrael will fall, goes in for a movement. Sign does bring out the mosh pit, forcing Illidan to dance. Rich is locked down, able to dive away towards his teammate. Kyoto will be there with the heals, but so far our teams are really battling back and forth, and you gotta call out, man, that level 7 talent, Icebound Fortitude, with that temp that you were mentioning, just keeping Arthas alive barely through that engagement.
This is very scary for MVP Black in a situation that they are not very comfortable with. We have to keep in mind that MVP Black went nearly undefeated within their region. They were absolutely dominant. I believe dropping only like 3 or 4 games throughout all of HGC Korea, and to open up against Tempest here after taking out Deadly Kittens. And remember game 2 of Deadly Kittens on Tomb of the Spider Queen?
Yeah.
It was way closer than anyone I think around the world would have expected. So a level down now, the mentality here for MVP Black has got to be shaken.
It is. It's going to be shaken for a little bit longer, too. They still need a half a level towards they get 10, and Tempest is already on their way for another turn-in. They have 43 gems set up and ready to move forward, while MVP Black is setting up well to make sure they can delay that turn-in. They grab Mercenaries to push in the middle so they get vision on their opponents and force them to clear it out. So Tassadar can hold that top side while Rich in the bottom working on 10, and the moment he gets at 10, he can snap hunt. So they have the ability to move in for a fight if Tempest overextends and tries to drop off those gems.
But they've got themselves their heroics, so at least this is a window for them to maybe make a big play. No surprising heroics coming online. The only maybe questionable variable is the fact that we have Archon over the force wall, but you know, it's about a 50-50 across the world there. It's very much situational. But with the dominance that MVP Black has shown, I felt when, you know, watching their games, trying to get the breakdown, rather than viewing what does MVP Black do best when they're winning like we do normally, I was just looking at what do they look like when they lose. And it oftentimes is never this early into a game, but it is when things aren't going to plan. You see them have an idea of how they think the game is supposed to develop, and when it doesn't, they go, what do we do? What do we do? And then it's like, screw it, we're going to fight. And I'm afraid that if this Webweaver phase isn't effective for them, that we might kind of see that trend for them as this game moves forward.
I mean, you can see it in their movement. Look at Tist here. He's playing a little bit more defensive than he normally would as he jumps in. But he's just sitting on the backside next to the Uther, waiting for an opportunity to pop up where Tempest may over-engage. We may need to see that aggression from him synergized with Rich. Here comes the push, though. How does Tempest manage to hold it? So far, they're doing pretty well. Do know that Hankano hasn't gone for his trademark build. He's actually gone for the Yonang cocktail. He wants that wave clear. They know they have to stop the Webweavers from coming in.
Rich is going to go ahead and drop the hunt. Without Tis and the rest of the members there, it's really just going to be a wasted cooldown. Luckily, you can get those auto attack resets once again from the passive. Hankono getting the flank now onto Tis, throws down the Eldruins. He's going to be fine. Lockdown, getting a bit of pressure here from Rich, but there's the power slide from Sai.
They're locking down Rich in the back right corner. He will get the hills from Uther. TH82 is going to go ahead and move forward. The Tempest hitting multiple members. Tempest being a bit timid on their engage. They always have to worry about that Sanctification and that Divine Shield.
That was I'm going to claim it's a winning trade for MVP Black only because the top Webweaver still is successful, right? They wanted to be able to bait them out and keep them by time, as I always constantly am talking about within these games. You never are really like, I want to fight you. I just want to make sure that you aren't dealing with the biggest, you know, objective onto the map, being that Webweaver, and it would cost them only the Archon for Army of the Dead. Now, if they can capitalize on that window with the 40 seconds remaining for that on H82, we could find ourselves with a very deadly MVP Black, because we got to keep our focus on the fact that Rich can, you know, kill any of those warriors as long as the Army of the Dead is not there for the Arthas.
I would argue they took a slight lead with that exchange, putting that fort low on the top side. Luckily, though, Tempest having gems are ready to fight back, get their turn in moving in. They're setting up on the top side already. Arthas clearing out the bottom as well once they get those pushing in. And you could see the same type of style that you saw from MVP Black here from Tempest. Feint as if you want to force a fight. Get those Webweavers pushing in so you can get aggression on the fort on the bottom side and even get towards those keep walls on the top.
And so they're going to eventually get value up through top, and bottom is most likely to be the main focus. 50% damage already put into into that Webweaver phase. MVP Black doing a very good job getting the defense here, so much so that Rich comfortable to go respond to bottom. And again, that's the only one that's likely to gain value here. We'll see if he's going to go ahead and drop the hunt. Cyber agility over the wall, and here's that rotation from Tempest. And this is a prime example of when I talk about being like 5 seconds behind transition is oftentimes where MVP Black feels, or excuse me, Tempest feels. There goes Rich getting the initiation, needing the Divine Shield. That was very aggressive and very ambitious. That mosh pit,
the mosh! Multiple members are dancing certification. Will come out to keep Sake alive, but Kyoto is still stuck on the heel on the back left side. We have Tychus constantly moving forward, but getting low at the same time. Sign chasing him down, members getting low, and finally Tychus will be taken away, as well as Tis being chased.
That was exactly what I was talking about for MVP Black. If things aren't going exactly as they expect, it hits a moment of sheer panic. Rich with the hunt and that initiation, he was legitimately a fraction of HP, and Kyocha throws out the Divine Shield, and they go, well, we're going to have to deal with it. Don't get me wrong, Sign, amazing punishment to be able to deal with this and allowing them to now get a 2-level lead, the possible first keep of the game. But MVP Black looks shaken.
That they do. I also want to shout out Tempest coming for that movement down the bottom to put pressure on Rich. Lockdown in particular got Genji straight at Odin's face, put out 3 forms of shurikens, making him down to a quarter health, which allowed Rhaegar to follow up and get that entire fight to open up due to that Divine Shield coming out. And so Tempest on the rotations, they're killing it.
And remember that MVP Black before this tournament, they were very, very confident. They came in saying that this is the best iteration of a roster that they have ever had. And that's a team who has done what no one else in the world has, gone undefeated in a global, not just an international like we saw from Fnatic, but flat out best of the best from all regions of the world, and they did not flinch, now claiming they're better than that. And between this game and what we've seen from Deadly Kittens, I'm willing to say that's a little too bold of a statement.
Yeah, Tempest is taking that statement, and they're definitely putting it to the test. Now, we still are in game number 1 here of this best of 5 series, so MVP Black could make that comeback. They could break it down and, you know, make that statement still stay true. But Tempest, for the moment, they are looking dominant, hitting level 16 here, even proccing the boss on the top if they want to make a move for it. In fact, it looks like they will start to rotate up. Rhaegar and ETC finally on their way, as Lockdown is really setting the stage for Web Weavers to push in. A boss on the top, they're looking for keeps.
But it is very convenient for MVP Black. Those Giants are a pretty solid deterrent to the Web Weaver, especially if it doesn't commit all the way to the lane to where that huge, you know, AoE cone outward is not going to land on top of it. It looks like it is far enough out for that to be the case, but much like on Cursed Hollow, you know, the Giants pretty much negate one angle, one entire lane onto the Web Weaver phase, or the map objective. Hunt's going to go on to hide, going into Ghost Wolf form. They're trying to make it out. Divine Shield used there for Kyocha, but nothing gained again for MVP Black. So frantic when it comes to their initiations. This is exactly the symptoms we see when they look at their weakest. Can they turn this around?
Hyde just sneaks out easily there, still saving the majority of their heroics, still have Arming the Dead up and Mosh Pit. Same can be said for MVP Black. They still have Signification and Archon, but Sign finally moves in. The dance will begin. They're looking at Tist. Ancestral Healing is slightly too late, and now MVP Black, they can turn the fight.
Yeah, that was a very big misplay on the side of Hyde, and now H82 is going to try and find his way out. Sanctification's dropped. Ancestral coming off cooldown here. Will he end up needing to use it? Looks like Hyde and the rest of the friends are comfortable. Rich doing his best to rid of that boss up on top, but we have to remember that top and bottom keep are already dead here for MVP Black. I gotta say it. That fight was 15 into 16 with Web Weavers pushing, and MVP Black said, this is the fight we want to take. Seriously think about, like, there are zero circumstances where you can say, other than an absolute one-shot, that might be a profitable call.
Yeah, it was a bit of an aggressive call for sure, especially when you can think about the clearing that they have capable for them. They have Odin, they have Tassadar. They can handle a boss pushing into them. They can handle Web Weavers on the top lane. They could have saved that keep. So the engagement, yes, was a little bit overstated. Maybe they could have made it work, but also look at Tempest. They could have not lost ETC. Had that Ancestral Healing came out slightly earlier, I see Tempest in a spot now where they're pushing down the middle and getting a third keep, or maybe the game.
Yeah, MVP Black cannot mess up one more time when it comes to these team fights. The way that the last two have looked have just been so lopsided, and now with that pressure that they have outward, death timers are climbing as we are scaling upward here into the talent tiers. The best part here for MVP Black is the fact that they have enough gems for a turn-in. They have the 16 talent tier, and Tempest is yet to find it. This fight around here could be huge because the Holy Ground value is going to be real. Rich opened up there with the hunt, but again, it is a pretty short cooldown.
Yes, this is the moment for MVP Black. They need to get this turn, and they need to force cooldowns to happen for Tempest, and they are charging forward with the Army of the Dead being used. MVP Black will now try to get away from the fight before Mosh Pit can even become online, which will be here in 5 seconds.
Another Divine Shield dropped, and Rich is unable to gain much value. Odin is used. Reset's not going to have that to siege with the Web Weavers that we were talking about into the draft phase. And the members of MVP Black now look to retreat, try and make sure that they get this turn in. 2 catapults have built up onto top. And so now that is something that Rich looks like he's going to back out and respond to. That's very convenient that they have him there onto the global. But let's be real here, Trick. With those gems turned in, they need to open up this map, or Illidan is not going to have, you know, the playground, the jungle gym that he wants. This is why Illidan used to be considered a poor pick on small maps.
Yeah, they would love to get the top fort and the middle fort taken out, and at least keep wall, could be in the bottom side or the top at least, to get some traction going for it and open up win conditions for the next turn-in. But Tempest is doing everything in their power to stop that from occurring. Tist is low. He will use Sanctification. The Hunt coming in.
The Hunt coming in, but Tist is still very low. The shielding is enough to keep himself alive. Dragon Blade gaining value from Lockdown. No
Mosh Pit
needed, but that 3-man Mosh Pit coming in from Sign, getting that punishment there, and that is now a 4-man wipe. Tempest is just looking unstoppable. They don't care about the Web Weavers. They are done with this. They are going to march right onto the core, and looks like to claim game number 1.
Arthas will lead the charge here to tank that core. Sake going to do everything he can here to slow it down, but it's not looking too good here. 20 more seconds before it's heroes on the field. 25 before Illidan shows up. Already the shield's being broken down to 50, down to 40, down to 30, down to 20, and Tempest, the number 3 seed in Korea, will earn the victory over MVP Black, the number 1 seed.
What a game, Wolf.
There were a lot of things to talk about in this game. We knew that Tempest had the better early game composition. We knew they had to get picks. So after watching pick number 2, 3, 4, I still wasn't convinced. I knew once the Divine Shield came out, there wasn't going to be a lot of CC for Genji specifically, but it was H82 who kept hitting the Tempest, kept slowing the entirety of those sloppy team fights we were talking about, Dreadnought. When MVP Black took the unreasonable engage, it was H82 to catch them and make sure they're there, punish them, slow them, allow those move-ins from Sign, where he came in, got these power slides, and we're going to take a look at potentially a replay here, not entirely sure, but the point of the matter here is they had the Swift Rhaegar build, they had Wolf run, they rotated very quickly, and they snowballed the game into this zone where MVP Black just could not recover. Here's the replay. Looks like we're going to be just watching one of these fights down here on the Web Weaver pushes. This is Illidan going in. This is that fight where Rich got the Divine Shield, and MVP Black decided that because they used that, they had to take the fight anyways. After the hunt came in, Divine Shield was there. The Sanctification was way too late, not on top of the fight, so MVP Black just scatters here. The Mosh Pit wins the fight, but the fight shouldn't have happened in the first place. Once Illidan went that low, probably should have been a disengage or perhaps a faster Sanctification to allow that disengage, but they thought they could fight. They thought with the Divine Shield, Rich was still going to be able to find the value, then get under the Sanctification, but the Mosh Pit ruined all of that.
Do you know how communication specifically works with MVP Black? Because, I mean, again, with that symptoms that they show when they look in their weakest form, they look unstoppable or they look honestly a little very, very weak. And it seems almost always Rich is the man to open up the fight. Granted, that is his role even when they look great, but it oftentimes is when he is on a different page from the remainder, and I'm just curious if you have any insight on that.
It's usually, you know, in my experience listening to comms or going back and watching replays of comms, sometimes OGN gives us those to listen to, right? It's Rich who goes in, and it looks like it's an unreasonable fight, and he's like, no, if you heal me now, and this is really quickly, you know, if you give me the shield, I can carry this, I can make this happen, trust me, is a thing Rich says oftentimes when he goes into those fights. It just felt like, though, in that case, it wasn't a reasonable ask. Even with the perfect Divine Shield from Kyocha there, I mean, it doesn't get better than that as a save. He couldn't get the heals he needed. The Mosh Pit came in. There was too much CC there, and I have to give continual props to H82 for making the position so difficult for Tist, always out of position, struggling to get out of those routes to get in and make those tanks happen.
I do have to wonder, though, if there was better control on ETC in that fight, would things gotten better? First off, we didn't have the cleanse from Uther. We had the Guardians of the Ancient Kings, which, okay, you can understand some of the reasoning behind that. But secondly, every time that we saw a Mosh Pit happen, it's when Odin was utilized, which means there's no grenade to stop that ETC from going off on the Mosh Pit. That control needs to be better.
Yeah, you are completely correct. And, you know, on the note of the focus of ETC in general, I mean, it was constant that Sign was just able to move in, get a Mosh Pit. This is the final one that we're going to take a look at here. But, I mean, you are completely correct, Trick. I agree with you.
Notice this fight, too, though. Like, look at what happens to Tist. He gets isolated, and he just can't do anything. He can't get the Sanct they were looking for. Has to Sanct to save himself, which means Rich, if you look at him now, the Mosh comes in. There's no protection here. The CC's just locked together, and, yeah, no answer for the Mosh Pit, but it looked like Tempest in that last fight, they knew, let's lock down Tist, let's make sure we root him, let's make sure he has to Sanct himself. He won't be able to Sanct the team. And Illidan, when you talk about his power on larger maps, it's the hunt, it's the macro, but in this game, because of the aggressive ETC pick, they couldn't go into that. And also, you know, when it came to team fighting, they knew how to handle Illidan, they knew how to handle Rich, excuse me. And it was the Lich King who handled Rich there. And basically what we saw was, okay, Illidan not getting macro power. He has to carry the team fights. Let's make sure that can't happen. Let's target down those Sancts.
Well, we know that this is a best of 5, unlike yesterday, where we did, in fact, have a lot of best of 3s. So the map bans are going to be very, very relevant. Where we're going for game number 2 is going to be high impact. Traditionally, we saw Sky Temple as the focus for game 2, but Tempest here is going to shift that dynamic here, and we're going to move on to Dragon Shard. To be honest, after seeing 2 games of MVP Black on small maps, I'm very confident that Tempest is going to look very good in this game.
I mean, for me, it's all coming down to HA2 on this top lane. Remember, the last time these two faced off, he was shut down by Rich and his Malthael. Again, Malthael was nerfed slightly here, so maybe not as strong. But if HA2 can hold his own on the top lane, I can see them, as you mentioned, these small maps that require the 4-mans, the 5v4s, the 5v5s to do well. Tempest to pull out another victory.
The clear advantage in 4-mans with the last comp was to Tempest, and I think it's easy to fall into the trap thinking, if you're watching this, wow, like MVP is so terrible in the 4-man, but when you're up against an ETC and Arthas, the advantage was always going to be Tempest. So I feel like if they draft